name's Belinda Berryman. I work for Health Infrastructure. We build all the public hospitals in New South Wales over 10 million and above, and I'm currently working on the Nepean Redevelopment. I work in the communications and engagement area of the project. So I work on the Nepean Redevelopment, which is a $1 billion hospital transformation project. And what that is a stage 1, which is a new 14-storey tower. And in parallel with that, we're also studying the planning stage for stage 2, which is going to be an additional build on campus. One of the key pieces of engagement that we've initiated for the project is the consumer committee. So we engaged several people from the Blue Mountains, the Lithgow and the Penrith area to be part of this consumer committee that meets every month. During that committee, we ask them questions in terms of spaces that they might be able to provide input into. We also use them as our community champions, so they go out into the community and promote the project. And we also meet with them to give them a general update. So there's often a gap between what we're doing behind the scenes and what the community finds out. And we hope that by having that consumer committee, we're closing that gap a little bit and there's a better connection to the community with community members. One of the best things that I find with the consumer committee in terms of carrying out this project was empowering our consumers to be the champions of the project, giving them the knowledge that they need, a little bit more knowledge than the average person would get, to make some pretty crucial decisions on the behalf of their community. So I think that was really rewarding in terms of them initiating discussions with us, coming up with new ideas unprompted, and having a bit more of a two-way dialogue as opposed to us just talking to them and then asking them really specific questions. What was also really good about the consumer committee is that if they heard any kind of feedback in their travels or when they're out in the community, they were feeding those things back to us. So they're saying, I'm hearing that this is happening at Nepean. Is this true? Or I'm hearing that this service is excluded for this redevelopment. Is that true? So we were able to tell them yes or no, and they can go back and try and clear up the issues or any questions that the community had, which has been really good. I think the project is always coming up with surprises. I think one of the biggest challenges is making sure that we can keep those consumers engaged. They're volunteers and they're giving us their time because they want to. And so making sure we're acknowledging that and that we're keeping them engaged, making sure that they're not burning out, because that's quite a challenge, I think. It's hard enough being employed on a project, let alone having a consumer that's trying to show interest in a project. And they're so passionate, which is great, but how do we keep them on that journey and make them feel like they're contributing? So staff is really important for the project. Obviously, it's about patient-centred care, but how do we deliver that care? You can't open a new hospital without looking at new ways of doing things and getting the staff involved in that process. How are we going to deliver that care when we open this new service is so important, and also getting them to think ahead of time because it's 2 years before they're going to move into this service. So how do we keep them engaged? How do we bring them along the journey? We've obviously got users who participate in user groups directly with the project, but also what about the back of house people who don't necessarily have a direct role in the planning, but need to be involved in some respect, and give them options to provide input into, say, artwork, the look and feel of the public spaces, those kind of things I think are really important to keep that engagement going. We're not just giving them information, but we're getting information back and making sure we're giving them the opportunity to provide feedback in ways that they can contribute, that they feel confident in contributing in. I think we're always applying it because I'm listening to the conference today and it's the same issues, it's the same challenges, but what is it? It's just new ways. So I think ultimately it's about that empowerment for us, empowering the users and the staff and the community to bring them on that journey. So if they feel like they can contribute, then they're on that journey with us. And I think that's one of the core areas of the IAP2 core values. I feel like at the moment we've got engagement specialists but I feel like there still needs to be a lot more accountability to get that consumer input and make it, round it out. So, close off that gap. We do the consultation and we do it well and we do it in the timeframes of the project, but then we've got to hand it over to the project architects and the designers and the builders, and making sure that they carry that and they have that responsibility for the consumer as well in mind. I think that is the biggest challenge, is getting everyone in a project passionate and enthusiastic about consumer input. Ultimately, the most rewarding aspect of this project is all the people that you meet. Being an engagement specialist means that you meet with clinicians, you meet with hospital staff, back of house people, you meet with Aboriginal liaison officers, you meet with a whole range of community groups and ages, and they're all really passionate in some way, and it's great to get to know them and to build those relationships so we can really make a difference at the end of the project. I think, like I touched on it a bit before, the biggest challenge with the project is making sure that we get the entire project team on that journey. We can do the consultation, we can do it when it's meaningful and we can ask the meaningful questions, but where does it go after that? And we don't necessarily always have control over that process. So making sure people understand the value of good community engagement and not being afraid, like taking the fear factor out of it. Consumers are great if you ask them the right questions and you give them that strength to and that empowerment to respond, then they will 9 times out of 10, they'll give you such a great, rewarding experience. I think the model of having consumer representatives in a monthly or a regular consultation, so having a consumer committee is one of the best avenues I think we've had from hospital projects to get that regular input, because building a hospital is really complex, and just bringing people in and out once or twice doesn't really give them the context, so I don't think they can have that meaningful consultation. Having a consumer committee that represents all the areas that this hospital is going to be caring for has been really rewarding, because they've been at the start of the journey and they really understand what the project's going to deliver, so they can really give meaningful consultation. I think it doesn't have to be a hospital project, it could be any project. If you've got ongoing and solid engagement and a deep understanding of that project, then you're going to give better feedback. My top 3 tips would be always be open and willing to learn. I think there's no point where you know everything, especially in engagement. I think making sure that you ask a lot of questions of those people, get to know them properly so you know what their boundaries are and what their limits are, because you want to make them feel comfortable, and as soon as they're not comfortable, they're going to close up and not give you that real open dialogue that you're ultimately after. Third and final tip would be enthusiastic about your project, because that kind of, if I'm giving off some enthusiasm, then they'll share that enthusiasm and everyone will be positive, a lot more positive. If you go in nervous or go in with a little bit of negativity, it might, work against you. So I think, being happy, enthusiastic and open ultimately will get the best outcomes. My advice to other practitioners is to stick with it, don't give up. There are always going to be challenges with the types of consumers that you're dealing with, and also challenges within your own project, people who don't necessarily believe in consultation or fear it. But as long as you plan ahead and give yourself the best options and ask questions, you're always going to come out with the right outcome.